and my life is like a lamp to a world that is searching for the path. We have become the example of Christ, and we are now the light of the world. Can the world see the radiance of Christ in you?
Evangelism does not happen by accident. Discipleship does not happen by accident. If we're going to fulfill our God-given mission as a church, we need to be intentional and reach out and share and introduce people to Jesus Christ.
Africa is an amazing continent with 50% of its population under the age of 18. If we impact the children, we would have impacted the future of the church and the future of our world.
Each one of us has something to bring to the table. Are you willing to release your resources? Surrendering your material goods or your gifts and talents or your time or your heart? What are you going to do?
If we're going to plant the 300 churches, if we're going to reach out to 1 million people through evangelism, if we're going to disciple 100,000 in this nation, and if we are going to have an impact with the poor, with the needy, with children, with all the others who are part of our communities around us, it's not going to happen unless you have committed yourself to the purposes of God and you have been faithful to live by those purposes. We're studying a series on money, or better, a series that we've called Prison Break. And the reason we've called this series of sermons, 8 sermons, Prison Break, is because many of us feel as though we are imprisoned by debt and by need and by our financial state and the bills that never seem to end, and we're crying to the Lord, please help me, Lord. I'm drowning in debt. I don't know what to do. I can't pay my fees. I can't pay the children's fees. Please help me. But we've said that when we stand before God at the end of life, for many of us here, we may ask God the question, Lord, why didn't you help me when I prayed so desperately? And God will tell you, but I did. I answered your prayer. Every month I gave you a salary, but you did not use it wisely, and your need was not for more money. Your need was for better stewardship. Because God will bless the one who is faithful with little. And if we're not faithful with what God is already putting in our hands on a month-by-month basis, whether it's because we're businessmen or we're employed, if we're not faithful with what God is giving us, then He will not give us more, because it will just mess us up even more seriously. The answer to wealth is not necessarily more money. For 90% of people, the answer to wealth is better stewardship, not more money. And so we're looking at the scriptures and asking the question, what then does it take for me to be a good steward of what God has given me? And we want to draw out 8 principles. Today we're looking at principle number 4. We, about 3 weeks ago, looked at principle number 1, and we said the first thing the Bible teaches us is that God is the giver of wealth. And He is able to enable us to make wealth. He gives us the strength, as it says in Deuteronomy, and the wisdom needed to create wealth. But if God is going to bless us with wealth, then the first thing the Bible tells us is that we are to set aside of the first fruits, 1/10 of what He gives us, and give it back to Him. And we said, you do not rob the hand that is trying to bless you. If God is trying to bless you and you're stealing his tithe, how can you expect him to make you wealthy? You do not rob the hand that is trying to bless you. The second principle was the following week, where we looked at the Proverbs that says, without a vision, a people perish. If you do not have a vision and a goal for where you're going with your finances, then you will never get there. If you're not aiming at anything, you will never hit it. You need to sit down and define clearly what your vision is. And we talked about how to do that and how to set aside 4 or 5 things that are clear. I shared my own testimony that one of my primary visions was, Lord, give us our own home. We want to own our home. And God has done that already. And I shared with you the other 4 things that we have prayed over the years that God would do, and he is doing them. Without a vision, a people perish. Last week, we were looking at the third principle that we said is what the Bible says, that you cannot put up a building and you haven't sat down and planned it out and thought it out. And if you try and you cannot finish, then everybody will laugh at you and say you started to build and you could not finish. You make financial commitments based on a plan. You think through, you project, you make budgets, and then you make the commitments. And if you don't have a budget, you are squarely on the road to poverty, because you will not accomplish that which you set out to do. I said it another way, because we looked at this, that if you're living on more than 60% of your income, and I defined income as what lands in your account at the end of the month, your take-home salary. If you're living on more than 60% of your take-home salary, you are living beyond your means. And you will end up in poverty. Now, I want to begin looking at principle number 4 by taking a step back into principle number 3. And I want to give you 7 good indicators if you're living beyond your means. I hope you went home, you looked at your salary again, you did the maths, and you could clearly see what percentage of your salary you consume and whether it's below 60%. But let me give you 7 indicators that you're living beyond your means. Number 1, you never have any money left over at the end of the month. And so you're constantly asking for an advance from your salary or trying to borrow from others. That's an indicator that you're living beyond your means. Number 2, your bills are spiraling out of control. And you're borrowing from the kiosk. You have to take things on loan. Your school fees were paid late. You owe your doctor, and you collect all the coins in your house to try and make them worth something. You've hardly paid one bill, and the next one is knocking at your door, and you're feeling harassed, and you're living beyond your means. Number 3, you carry a balance on your credit card. You see, the banks love it, and we'll talk about credit cards next time. The banks love it when you don't pay your full credit card bill. They tell you you have 100,000 your bill and you are allowed to pay only 10%. And they pray and they hope that you will only pay 10%, because they will make an income on interest on the other 90%. They don't want you to pay. And they make it as easy as possible for you to pay just 10% so that they can make money off you. And if you're not paying your balance and you're carrying a balance on your credit card, you are living beyond your means. Number 4, you have no emergency funds. If you lost your job today, you would not survive the 6 months or 12 months that it takes in this country to get another job. And that's a clear indicator that you are living beyond your means. Number 5, ladies, but this applies to men too. You hide what you buy. So that beautiful pair of shoes that you bought, you leave it in the boot of the car and you wait until your husband is out, and then you take it into the house and you put it somewhere at the back, and finally when you wear those shoes and your husband asks you, are they new? You say, no, I've had these for 3 months. You're living beyond your means. You know you feel guilty about it and you're trying to hide it because you're living beyond your means. Now the guys do the same. It's only that their toys are bigger and shinier. Okay, number 6, you borrow loans from friends and from family and from workmates regularly. Every month, please tide me over. I just need to borrow this amount. And you borrow, then when you're paid, you pay back. But the next month, you're back again to borrow some more. You're living beyond your means. And number 7, your total debt burden. That is your mortgage, your car loan, your advance on your salary, your credit card bills. Your total debt burden exceeds 30% of your take-home salary. That's an indicator that you're living beyond your means. You can't afford the lifestyle you're living, and you are headed towards poverty. I want to show this to you in a diagrammatic form, okay? And this is going to lead us then to the principle I want to teach you today. I'll put a graph up on the screen, and it's a graph of your income. Okay, that's your income, steady through the month. If you're a businessman, it goes up and down, but this is an average. And then I want to show you what the expenditure of most people looks like. You remember the statistic of the research done that indicated that Kenyans on average spend 105% more than they earn. But those in the urban center are living at about 120% of what they earn. And this is what their expenditure looks like in the next graph. Okay, there you go. At the end of the day, there is nothing set aside. Some months you consume more than other months, and on average, most months you spend more than you earn. This person is a poor man, and he is headed towards poverty. But let me show you what a rich man looks like and how he uses his money. Can you see the difference? There is a gap between expenditure and income, and income exceeds expenditure. You remember I told you at the end of last week's sermon, it's not how much you earn that counts. It is how much you save that counts. And that gap between income and expenditure is what you would call your wealth capacity gap. The bigger it is, the more you create wealth. But the smaller it is, the less you create wealth. There are people who are paid 700,000, 1 million shillings, 1.5 million shillings in this country. But they are poor because they consume it all and nothing remains over at the end of the month. There are people who are paid 40,000, but they are good at minimizing their expenditure, and little by little they are creating wealth, and they will end up wealthy at the end of life as compared with those who are paid a lot. It's not how much you earn that counts. It's how much you save or put aside. And then there's a third graph. When an increase comes, the wise man, when he is paid more with the top line now, the new income, puts aside the difference and is able to create wealth quicker. He does not allow lifestyle creep to take over and consume what he has been paid as a bigger salary. He puts it aside and creates wealth even faster. But the foolish man watch what happens to the foolish man. His expenditure goes up. And what he does is now, because he's paid more, he moves into a more posh house. He buys a new car. He starts dressing in brand clothes. He starts wearing cologne, and he buys a flat screen TV and moves his kids to a more posh school. That fool is on the road to poverty, and he will end up poor. Now, you don't like your pastor using the word fool, especially if this is you. But let me tell you guys, okay? Proverbs 21 and verse 20. This is how it reads in the New International Version. The fool spends his money as fast as he gets it. And that's that second person. It calls him the fool. Some versions say the stupid spend their money as fast as they get it. So it's not me calling you a fool, it's a Bible calling you a fool. Okay? In fact, one version puts it this way: the fool gulps his money down, like eating it in big gulps and swallowing his money. That's what the fool does. But the wise man is like an ant. He sets it aside in the season of plenty, so that in the season of want, he has enough to care for his own. You've got the idea now, okay? Now I want us to turn to the Bible and we learn principle number 4. Turn with me to Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through to verse 11. It's a story of Moses before the burning bush. One day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of the bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it did not burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't the bush burning up? I must go and see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called him from the middle of the bush. Moses, Moses, here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of the harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead the people of Egypt, of Israel out of Egypt. But Moses protested to God, who am I that I am to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? And the rest of the chapter is Moses trying to get out of his commission. I can't go. I don't speak well. I'm not the right person. Send somebody else. And he's giving excuse after excuse after excuse to God as to why he should not go. But then in chapter 4, God begins to do something that turns him around. Chapter 4, verse 1 through 4. But Moses protested again. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What am I to say? The Lord never appeared to you? Then the Lord answered him, what is that in your hands? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Throw it on the ground. The Lord told him, so Moses threw down the staff and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, reach out and grab its tail. So Moses reached out and grabbed the tail, and it turned back into a shepherd's staff in his hand. God asked Moses this question: what is that in your hand? And when Moses named it, God used it. You see, God has a power to take the most lifeless thing and use it for his purposes. And so you find in the book of the Judges that he used a jawbone of a donkey to bring victory to Israel through Samson. He used an ox goad to defeat the Philistines through Shamgar. He used a tent peg in Deborah's hands to defeat the Canaanites when she drove the peg into the temple of the king of the Canaanites. He used trumpets and jars to defeat the Midianites through Gideon. He used a slingshot and a pebble or a stone in a little boy's hand, David, to defeat the giant called Goliath. And why does God do it? It's because the battle belongs to him. It's not about the instrument itself. It is that God is able to deliver. And the instrument is but a tool. And so he asked Moses, what is that in your hand? And Moses told him, a shepherd's stick. That's all it is. It's a dead object. Now, that dead object for Moses was a sign of his profession, his career. It was a sign of his authority as a shepherd over the sheep. It was a sign of his identity. If you saw him, you knew he was a shepherd. But as long as it was in Moses' hands, it was a dead symbol, just a stick. But when Moses named it and gave it to God, it came alive. Even Moses himself shrunk back because he was afraid of it. And when he picked it up again and he put it in his hands again, it became a dead stick once again. I want to suggest to you, good people, that there are those of you here who are in dead careers, and you're in dead dreams, and you're in dead marriages, and you have dead futures because you hold on to them. You won't give them to God. You're afraid that he will change them, or that the outcome may not be what you want for yourself. And so you hold on to them. But as long as you hold on to them, they are dead. But when you give it to God, you name it and give it to God and allow God to be God, he will take that which is dead and he will bring it alive. And yes, he may transform it. He did not transform Moses' dead stick into a living stick. He transformed it into something completely different. And God may take your career and transform it into something completely different, but he will bring it about, he will bring it alive, and he will do his miracles through it. But you must let go and you must let God. Otherwise, it remains dead in your hands. Let me come back to our topic. I believe that this is principle number 4. God asked Moses, what is that in your hand? And Moses named it and gave it to God, and it came alive. So principle number 4 is simply this. I'll state it in different ways, but simply this. What is that in your hand? Name it and give it to the Lord and let him bring it alive. A number of years ago, I was struggling with the question of my own family state. Our desire to have enough to educate our children, to, be able to own our home, to get ahead of the bills, and etc., etc. And I was praying about this. I was concerned about it and fearful that, Lord, at this rate, I'll never get ahead. And the question that God asked me was, what is that in your hand? Now, I live on 1 acre of land. I've told you this before, but I live on 1 acre of land. And my response to the Lord was, you've given me 1 acre of land, Lord. That's what I have. But the Lord began to open my eyes for me to see that He's given me a lot more. So I want to take you on a tour around my home so that you can see what I'm talking about. What is that in your hand? Okay? If you come to my home and I open the gate for you, one of the first things you will see are my dogs. Okay? They'll meet you. And you don't mess with my dogs. I've been breeding Rottweilers for a long time, but now I have begun to breed Boorbells, okay? From South Africa. These are Mastiffs. They weigh about 100 kilos. You don't mess with my dog. It's a pedigree dog, a pure breed. This is not a Shenzi dog, okay? You know the difference between a pedigree and a Shenzi dog? Let me tell you the way somebody explained it to me once. When you go to a place and you try and get into a place with a pedigree dog like this, it simply asks a question, who? And you stop, okay? Because it's a bass, it rumbles, who? But when you go to a home with a Shenzi dog, first of all, it goes under the car. And then from underneath it goes, no. No. For those of you who don't understand the language, it's asking you, who are you with? And who and who? And it's a shrill voice and it's barking from under the car. But with my dog, you don't mess with it. And it is the first thing that you will see. And I realize God has put that in my hands. What do I mean? I mean this. To buy a puppy, 8 weeks old, of a pedigree dog like this, whether it's a Rottweiler or it is a Boorbell, costs you about 100,000 shillings. Just a puppy, 8 weeks, okay? And let me tell you, the value of the dog is not the puppy itself. It is the pedigree, the papers that it comes with. Because the papers tell you who the parents are, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, up to 5 or 6 generations. And that's what shows that it is a pure breed. You go and register it at the Kennel Club, and they will examine that. And if it is correct, then yours is a pedigree dog, 100,000 shillings, okay? I buy my puppies at 100,000 shillings. But here's what you do, guys, okay? You buy 1 male and 2 females, 300,000, okay? And then you breed the male with the females, okay? Each dog, female comes into heat twice a year. But you only breed once if you want to get good, strong puppies. If you overbreed, they become weaker and weaker. But once a year, you get good, strong puppies. When the female gives birth, it gives you up to 10 or 12 puppies, okay? Somewhere between 8 and 12, okay? And you feed those dogs, those puppies. And they're not, Shenzi. They don't eat leftovers. You can always tell somebody in a supermarket who is keeping pure breed dogs because their trolley is full of Weetabix and, chicken and mincemeat and, eggs and milk. They eat better than you. I had one guy who told me how he was breeding, Rottweilers, and he kept wondering why his puppies are so small and thin. And finally, he tracked it down. The guy who was looking after them for him could not imagine that this dog is eating meat and milk and Weetabix, so he would take those things and give it Shenzi food. And the puppies were weak and small. You don't do that to a pedigree. You look after them, you take them to the vet, they get 4 different jabs, and at 8 weeks, you sell them off. 8 weeks. There is a bonding window for dogs that is between week 8 and week 12. If you ever buy a puppy, make sure that it is in that window because it will bond with whoever is its master. If they grow beyond that window, then the value of the dog goes down because they don't bond as well as a puppy. And so you sell it off at 8 weeks. Now, by the time you sell it off, if you count the vet bills and the food bills and everything that you put into this dog, you have spent about somewhere between 20 and 40,000 per puppy. If you have 2 dogs, you get 20 puppies in a year. You sell them at 100,000. You're making a clean profit of 50,000 per puppy. 50 times 20 is a chameleon. And when I realized this, I realized all I had ever asked my dogs to do for me was free board and room and then to protect me at night. But every year that goes by, these dogs could give me $1 million. And I became a breeder. And I actually breed. By the way, guys, my bitch is on heat right now. In about 3 months, I'll have puppies. Talk to me. So that's the first thing, okay? The second thing you will see when you come into my compound is you will see a kitchen garden. It is about the size of this stage, okay? And on that, we've taken the challenge with my wife that we will grow all our food from the garden, all the sukuma and everything. And so we grow, pumpkins and sukuma and terere and spinach and chili pepper and hoho and several other things on that little patch of land. And we have so much that sometimes when people come to visit, that's what we give them to go home with because it's too much. We can't keep up with our little kitchen garden. I'll tell you the secret of the kitchen garden in a minute. But we decided, this God has put in my hand. I'm living on an acre of land. What can I do with an acre of land? It should certainly be able to feed my family. And so we have made a commitment that as much as possible, we are going to live off our property. And we grow all our greens on the property itself. It doesn't make me money like the dogs, but it saves me money so that I don't have to spend that in the shops. That's the second thing. Third thing, we have a lot of flowers on the compound, flower beds. But what we've done with the flowers is somewhere in between the flowers there, we're growing all our herbs, okay? Now, I went to school, and I was told it's not herbs, herbs. That is Kenyan. It's like how we say birds. Instead, these ones that fly in there, we call them birds. They're not birds, they're birds. Okay? And it's not herbs, it's herbs. The H is silent, okay? So we grow all our herbs on the compound. And we have lemongrass and mint and lavender and thyme and many other sorts of herbs among the flowers. You think they're flowers, but they're actually things we can use in our kitchen, okay? And then we have a lot of trees on the compound. But they're not just trees. There are some that are just trees. But some of my trees are pawpaw and loquats and avocado and lemons. And we harvest on a regular basis. Number 5 is I keep bees, okay? And let me tell you how bees work. A hive, if you want to buy an empty hive, is 9,000 shillings. If you buy the top quality, 9,000 shillings. Every hive will give you about 10 kilograms of honey at the harvest. I recently harvested from my 6 hives, and I got 50 kilos of honey, okay, from the 6 hives. And having harvested, I then wait another 3 months, and I harvest again. So 50 kilos. Each kilogram goes for 1,000 bob. That's 50,000 kilos. And like I said last week, bees are your best workers. They never take sick off. They never take a day off. They don't go on a Sabbath. They never ask you for a raise. They just work. And so 6 hives, 50 kilos. Each kilo is 1,000. Now the clue is to multiply that. As I have done this and I have come to understand bees, and let me tell you, by the way, guys, the stuff you buy in the supermarket, that one is molasses plus syrup plus a bit of honey plus water. It's not the real stuff. Talk to me. You can smell real honey. It has a taste that you won't find in that stuff. 50 kilos at 1,000 bob each. And the key is to multiply the hives. As I have done this, I have begun now to figure out how to multiply. I actually think my acre has a capacity for about 50 to 100 hives. and I've only got 6, and I got 50,000 just the other day. I have a capacity for 50 to 1,000. Let me tell you where you put your hives. Do you know your house has this huge ceiling, and above the ceiling is the attic, and it's empty up there? Put hives there. Bees don't mind. As long as it doesn't get too hot, they will come in and out through the, what do you call it? They'll find a way to get into the space. I told my family I was going to put hives there. They told me, no. At the house, you put hives and we'll be stung. I said, how does a bee get from there into the house? There's a ceiling. We're not living in a grass-thatched house. There's a ceiling. You're protected from them. And if you leave them alone, they leave you alone. That is basically what it is. And so I am going to increase my hives. You laugh. But when you see me at the teller handing in my money, remember my bees, okay? That's number 5. Number 6 is I keep rabbits, okay? And the reason I keep rabbits is for the meat supply. Because our challenge is, how can we live off our property without needing to buy food groceries? And so we keep rabbits for the meat, okay? But I discovered that the rabbit gives you 3 other products apart from the meat. The first product it gives you is susu, okay? Rabbit urine is bought on the market here by farmers, and per jerrycan of 5 kilograms is sold at 2,000 shillings. You know why? Because it is the best possible fertilizer you could ever imagine. I once asked my gardener, how is it that our lettuce are so big and they have so much and we can't keep up with them? And he said, susu power. And it's not just that. If you take rabbit urine and dilute it, it is a perfect insecticide. And so you have solved 2 problems in one, fertilizer and insecticide. And rabbits give you one other product that is also useful. I'll come to it in a minute. Number 7 is I harvest all the water that falls on my compound. God sends you the wealth of rain every year, twice a year here in Kenya. For most of us, it's a bother. Because of the mud and the wetness, we don't like it, and we let it run off and disappear. I actually told, my neighbor was building, and I told him, can you direct all your runoff water into my compound? I'm happy to have it. And he didn't know what to do with it. And so he put his outlets all into my drive and into my compound, because I have dug a pit in the compound that goes down about 8 feet, and it is filled with water. I never lack water because I harvest my water. All the rainwater goes into the same place. On one side of the house, it goes into a well that is drinking water. On the other side, it goes into my pond. Now, in the pond, on top of harvesting rainwater, I also harvest all my bath and shower and kitchen water. When you shower, you use about 30 liters of water to have your shower. And all it has is a little soap into it. So I don't direct it to the septic tank. I direct it to my pond, and I collect water. So if you come on my compound, my grass is always green. Even in the dry January, February season we've just gone through, it was lush green. So I'm harvesting water, and I'm harvesting my bath water. In 14 years of living where I do, while the neighbors all complain that they have no water in Karen, I have never lacked water because I have water in abundance. And I am not only harvesting the water, but directing the bath water into the pond. And I use that to water the grass and my trees. So there is a harvest from them, and my grass is always plush green. Because I can then use the garden, and I'll come to that in a minute. Now I'm thinking of throwing in catfish into the pond. And catfish, the perfect food for catfish is rabbit pellets droppings. They love the droppings of rabbits. So now I have a closed system where everything is helping everything make wealth for me. Okay? One more. I am now harvesting the sun. because I have put in water heaters, solar heaters, so that I can cut down my electric bill and I can get hot water all the time. And by the way, let me say this, because there was a notice in the papers just a month ago that every house with more than 2 bedrooms, I believe it is, in this country is now required to have a solar heater. And the article in the papers was that the government is going to send officers round to check, and they will penalize you if you don't have. Because God has given us abundant sun here in this part of Africa. We don't need to use electricity and waste money. You can harvest the sun. What is that in your hands? And I all of a sudden realized that God has blessed me abundantly. And it goes beyond that. My beautiful garden is sometimes hired as a wedding photography garden. And I get a little something. And, let me tell you other things you can do. I have a car. Have you ever thought of giving your car work? Many of you take your car to the office and you park it, and it's making money for the city council. Why don't you Uber that car? Or if you can't Uber it because it's a mkebe and it's too old, then you make it into a taxi. Or if it's third generation and even a taxi, people won't get into it, then you make it school transport for your neighbors. But it's sitting there in your office and it's not making money for you, it's making money for the city council. Or you could bake, or you could write books, or you could do artwork, or you could keep chickens, or you could hire out your skills, and you can make money because God has put ability and hobbies and skill and wisdom in your hands. When you go to your boss and you ask him for a raise, it is unlikely that he will give you one. But before you do that, sit down, name what God has put in your hands, and give it to him and ask him to use it to help you create wealth. That's all you need. And you will be amazed what you can do. Some of you grew up on a farm. You understand cows, you understand goats, you understand chicken, you understand the harvest seasons. Why are you living in Nairobi instead of going and living out in Kikuyu, where you can have half an acre of land and make money off it? Not turn it into a garden, but make money off it. What is that in your hands? This is a question God would ask us. Now, none of these methods are going to create big money for me, okay? But if the dogs do what they're supposed to do, they can cover all their costs in terms of food, and I don't need to take money out of my pocket to pay for their food. They cover their own. I can use my herbs so that I don't have to go and buy them. And what it allows me to do is to reduce my expenditure, and some of them allow me to increase my income. And the bigger the gap between income and expenditure, the more wealth you create. And so none of these are professional. I do them simply in simple ways. What is that in your hands? Let me illustrate this principle from the Bible, okay? Turn with me to Proverbs chapter 31. And let's read the noble woman in Proverbs chapter 31 as we draw to a close. I'll read it straight. The wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. So number one is she has a cottage industry. She's making things from her home. Verse 14, she is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night and provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. Verse 16, she considers a field and buys it. So she's speculating on land. Number 2, okay? And then the second part of verse 16, out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. So she's also a farmer, okay? We go on to verse 17. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable. So she's also trading, not just farming, but trading. And her lamp does not go out at night. In her hands she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. So she's sewing and making cloth at night. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She has reduced her expenditure by making her own clothes in the home instead of going to buy them. She makes her bed covers for her bed, and she is clothed in fine linen and purple. Now that's number 6. Number 7, her husband is respected at the city gate where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. So she's, a retailer, okay? And then the second part of that, verse 24, and she supplies the merchants with sashes. So now she's a wholesaler, okay? She is clothed with strength and dignity, and she can laugh all the way to the bank. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Do you know what Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and verse 2 says? This is what it says. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 2. Invest in 7 ventures. Yes, in 8. For you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. And what I'm saying, guys, is you want to create wealth, then multiply your revenue streams to at least 7 things that are creating money or saving money for you. And then you begin to create wealth. The woman in Proverbs 31 does it. Your pastor does it. And guys, I am wealthy. And it's not because of a big fat salary, but because I have sought to answer the question, what is that in your hands? And in little ways, with little steps, I have begun to create wealth. Go home and work through, sit down, name, write down the things that God has put in your hands, and then ask Him to bring them alive, one at a time. Start with this one. I was talking to somebody after the first service, and he said, I'm so convicted. I have almost 50 acres in my rural areas, and I planted trees on it. And I told him, go and buy hives and go and start keeping bees there. On 50 acres, you can keep 1,000 hives. Every year, those hives will bring you 5 or 6 million just from keeping hives. What is that in your hands? This is how you begin to create wealth. May God bless you. Go do the homework. Will you stand to your feet and let's pray together? Father, we pray that you would hear our cry. And as we ask you to help us meet our challenging financial needs, open our eyes to see how it is you have already answered our question, but we were blind and could not see. Give us divine ideas that will help us generate wealth. And as we go into this week, we ask for your blessings, your presence around us, your wisdom as we make our decisions, and your grace as we seek to walk in godliness. Would you bless the work of our hands this week? For it is the primary way that we make our wealth. Help us to be good and studious servants and employees, that we may see the blessings that are poured upon our organizations, and they may rejoice that these children of God are a part of what we're doing, and they may compensate us well because we're valuable to them. Bless our families. Bless all that is loved of us. May we know the good hand of the Lord upon us. For this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you.